Quiet marriage, loud questions. There is a question that keeps coming back late at night, when everything feels a little too stable. Why does my marriage feel so quiet? Is that a bad sign? If you are learning English, living in the United States, or quietly trying not to give up on both your relationship and your listening-speaking practice, this question probably feels familiar. You are not fighting. You are not unhappy. But you are also not talking the way you used to. Everything feels quiet. And strangely, that silence makes more noise in your head than any argument ever did. I have lived in the United States long enough to learn something unexpected. Here, silence is not always a problem. But if you come from a culture where love is loud, where feelings are explained, repeated, and checked every day, a quiet marriage can feel like a warning sign. Like a room with dim lights. Nothing is broken, but you are not sure you are safe either. The first time I really noticed how quiet my marriage had become, it did not happen during a fight. It happened on a very ordinary evening. Fall came early that year. Cold air slipped through the window, making a soft whistling sound. We had dinner. No tension. No anger. Just very few words. I washed the dishes. My partner watched the news. The silence lasted just long enough for my brain to start doing what it does best, making up stories. Your brain hates uncertainty. It loves drama. When it does not have clear information, it creates its own explanation. And the easiest explanation is always fear. Maybe love is fading. At that time, my English was not strong enough to express complex emotions. I thought in my native language, but lived in English. That gap felt exhausting. If you are practicing English, you know this feeling well. You can hear people speaking, but you are not fully sure you understand the meaning behind the words. Americans often use fewer words. Good. Fine. All set. No emotional details. No long explanations. At first, I thought they were cold. Later, I realized it was cultural. Saving words does not mean saving care. Marriage works the same way. In many Asian cultures, silence often means something is wrong. In American culture, silence can simply mean normal life. People are tired. People respect space. People do not explain their emotions out loud all the time. But if you use your old cultural translation, you will misunderstand the situation. And once you misunderstand silence, anxiety grows. Quietly. That night, sitting on the couch, I asked myself in slow, careful English, is quiet a bad sign? I did not ask out loud. Asking would mean admitting fear. And when you are new to a country and unsure of your language, silence feels safer than making a mistake. This is also why many people quit learning English. Not because English is impossible, but because living in constant partial understanding is tiring. You listen, but you are never fully sure. You speak, but you cannot say everything you feel. Quiet frustration builds up, just like in a quiet marriage. Psychology calls this uncertainty stress. Your brain works harder when it has to guess what something means than when it faces clear conflict. It sounds strange, but a clear argument can feel less stressful than long Unexplained silence. At least with an argument, you know where you stand. I realized I was making the same mistake with English and with marriage. I expected progress to be loud. I expected love to feel exciting all the time. But both language learning and long-term relationships grow best in quiet repetition, not emotional fireworks. The next morning, I tried something small. Very small. During breakfast, I said one simple sentence in English. No explanation. No emotional speech. Just, it feels quiet lately. I placed the sentence on the table like a glass of water. There was no drama. No long discussion. Just a calm response, yeah. But I think it's okay. That moment stopped me. Not because the answer was deep, but because I suddenly understood something. This silence was not empty. It was a pause. Like the short space between sentences when you practice slow English listening. If you rush, you miss the meaning. Marriage in the US slowly began to feel like advanced level English to me. Fewer words, more context. Less emotional explanation, more small actions. Quiet does not mean distance. Sometimes it means safety. It means both people trust the space between them. I started noticing other signs. Coffee made without asking. A jacket left by the door because the weather changed. Small things, said without words. Just like English fluency. Love had moved from loud sentences to silent understanding. The real problem was not that my marriage felt quiet. The problem was that I was reading it in the wrong language. And maybe English and love were teaching me the same lesson at the same time. You do not always need more words. Sometimes, you need better listening. Silence is not always a warning. Sometimes, it is a sign that nothing needs to be fixed right now. Sometimes, quiet is not the end of the story. It is the part where you finally hear what matters. Arriving in America. The first thing you notice when you arrive in the United States is not the language. It is the air. It feels different, almost sharp, especially if you land in a place where the sky is wide and the wind has nothing to block it. I remember stepping out of the airport and thinking, so this is America. The buildings looked familiar from movies. But my body felt confused, like it had arrived a few seconds before my mind did. Everyone around me walked fast. Not rushed, just efficient. People pulled suitcases with one hand and checked their phones with the other. No one looked lost, even though many of us were. I followed the signs, listening carefully to the announcements. English everywhere. Clear. Fast. Confident. My English, on the other hand, felt soft and shy inside my head. At that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. Knowing English in a classroom and living in English are two very different things. In school, English waits for you. In America, it does not. It keeps moving, like the weather. The climate was my first teacher. I arrived during a season change, when mornings were cold and afternoons suddenly warm. People dressed in layers, ready for anything. I was not. I wore the wrong jacket, the wrong shoes, the wrong expectations. Later, I understood this was a good metaphor for my entire immigration. Head. Milk had 10 options. Bread had more. I listened to conversations around me, trying to catch familiar words. Organic. Low-fat. Gluten-free. My brain worked non-stop, like a phone with two. Many apps open. At home, silence returned. Not the silence of marriage, but the silence of being new. No friends nearby. No familiar sounds from the street. Just the hum of appliances and the distant noise of cars. I missed the chaos I once complained about. Here, everything felt too organized, too quiet, too far apart. This is where many people lose motivation to practice English. You feel tired before you even begin. Every sentence costs energy. Every interaction feels like a small test you did not study for. You start avoiding conversations, not because you do not want to talk, but because you want to rest. Science explains this clearly. When you operate in a second language, your brain uses more cognitive resources. Simple tasks require more focus. This is called cognitive load. Your brain is not weak. It is working overtime. But if you do not understand this, you blame yourself. You think, why am I so slow? Why do I feel stupid? I felt that way too. One afternoon, I went to a local cafe alone. I rehearsed my order in my head before reaching the counter. Simple words. Clear pronunciation. When it was my turn, the barista smiled and asked a question I did not expect. My brain froze. I heard the sounds, but meaning did not arrive. I smiled back, nodded, and hoped my response made sense. It did not matter. The coffee still came. Life moved on. That was another lesson America taught me early. Perfection is not required for participation. You do not need perfect English to live here. You need brave English. Climate shapes culture more than we realize. In many parts of the US, weather forces people indoors for long periods. Cold winters. Hot summers. People learn to respect personal space. They speak directly. They keep conversations functional. This affects relationships, friendships, even marriage. It also affects how English sounds. Short sentences. Clear purpose. Less emotional decoration. At first, this felt cold to me. Later, it felt honest. I began to notice patterns. People greeted each other politely but briefly. How are you? Did not always mean a real question. It was a social signal. Understanding this changed everything. I stopped answering with long explanations. I learned to respond simply, good, thanks. My English improved not because I studied harder, but because I listened better. At home, my marriage was also adjusting to America. Different schedules. Different stress. Different expectations. We were both learning a new country at the same time. And that takes quiet energy. The silence I noticed earlier was already forming here, during these early days, shaped by climate, culture, and constant adaptation. One night, after a long day of confusion and small victories, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights turn on. Everything felt unfamiliar, but not dangerous. I realized I did not need to understand everything at once. I only needed to stay curious. Language learning works the same way. You do not conquer English in one moment. You slowly arrive. Word by word. Situation by situation. Just like arriving in America. Fluency is not a destination. It is a process of standing in new places and letting discomfort teach you. If you are listening to this and feeling tired, confused, or behind, remember this. Arriving is already progress. You are not failing. You are adjusting. Climate, culture, language, and relationships are all changing at the same time. Anyone would feel overwhelmed. The mistake is thinking you should feel confident immediately. Confidence comes later. First comes awareness. Then patience. Then small routines that turn fear into familiarity. America did not welcome me with loud applause. It welcomed me with quiet challenges. And in that quiet, I began learning not just English, but a new way of being present. Sometimes, arrival is not a moment. It is a long sentence you are still learning how to finish. Learning English the hard way. No one tells you this at the beginning, but learning English in America is not really about grammar. It is about embarrassment. Small, daily embarrassment. The kind that does not hurt enough to complain about, but hurts enough to make you tired. You mispronounce a word. Someone corrects you politely. You smile, say thank you. And promise yourself you will remember next time. Then next time comes, and the word disappears again. This is the hard way of learning English. Not through books, but through living. Back home, my English felt acceptable. I could read. I could write. I could even speak in full sentences if I had time to prepare. But in America, English does not wait. It shows up suddenly, asks questions, changes topics, and expects quick answers. You do not get subtitles. You do not get time to translate in your head. At first, this made me quiet. Very quiet. I listened more than I spoke. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I did not trust my English to carry my thoughts safely. Every sentence felt like crossing a bridge I was not sure could hold my weight. The strange thing is, silence looks similar from the outside, whether it comes from confidence or fear. People could not tell I was struggling. They just saw someone calm, reserved, maybe shy. Inside, my brain was working non-stop. Translating. Predicting. Preparing escape routes if I did not understand. This constant effort is exhausting, and many learners misunderstand it. They think they are weak. They think they lack talent. In reality, their brain is doing advanced multitasking. Neuroscience shows that using a second language activates more areas of the brain, especially those responsible for attention and self-control. You are not bad at English. You are just using more energy than native speakers. I learned English the hard way because I had no choice. Work required it. Daily life required it. Even small things, like calling a doctor or returning a package, became language lessons. I remember standing in a store, rehearsing one sentence again, and again, I'd like to return this. When I finally said it, My voice sounded smaller than I expected. But the sentence worked. The world did not end. That was an important lesson. English does not need to sound perfect to be useful. At home, I noticed something interesting. My English improved fastest when I stopped treating it like a performance. When I stopped trying to sound smart, polite, or impressive, and just tried to be clear. The same thing was happening in my marriage. Less explanation. Less emotional speeches. More simple truth. The hardest part of learning English is not vocabulary. It is tolerance for mistakes. In many cultures, mistakes feel shameful. In America, mistakes are normal. People make them publicly, constantly, without apology. Once I understood this, my English changed. I spoke more. I failed more. And I learned faster. I also learned to listen differently. Not every word matters. Native speakers skip sounds. They shorten sentences. They rely on context. Instead of trying to understand every word, I trained myself to listen for meaning. This reduced stress immediately. My listening improved not because my ears changed, but because my expectations did. There is a concept in psychology called good enough processing. Your brain does not need perfect information to function. It needs enough information. Language works the same way. You do not need full understanding to respond appropriately. You need confidence to move forward anyway. I practiced English in the least dramatic places. The kitchen. The car. The grocery store. I repeated phrases I heard on the radio. I copied the rhythm, not the accent. I paid attention to how people started and ended conversations. These patterns mattered more than grammar rules. Slow English became my secret weapon. I spoke slower on purpose. I paused. I allowed silence. Silence gave my brain time to catch up. Ironically, speaking slower made people listen more carefully. They did not rush me. They adjusted. Communication became a shared responsibility, not a test I had to pass alone. This changed how I felt about silence in general. Silence was no longer failure. It was space. Space to think. Space to choose words. Space to breathe. The same silence that once scared me in my marriage now felt familiar, even helpful. One evening, after a long day of English mistakes and small successes, I realized something quietly powerful. Learning English the hard way was teaching me patience. Not just with language, but with myself and others. It softened my need to control conversations. It made me a better listener. In marriage, this mattered more than perfect words. Understanding tone, timing, mood. These things cannot be translated directly, but they can be felt. As my English improved slowly, my relationships deepened quietly. Many people quit English right before this stage. Right when frustration peaks. Right before confidence becomes calm instead of loud. They assume learning should feel exciting all the time. It does not. Most of the time, it feels repetitive, awkward, and invisible. But invisible progress is still progress. If you are listening to this and thinking, I am learning English the hard way too, then you are doing it right. You are not behind. You are in the middle. The uncomfortable middle where growth hides. Language is not learned when you feel confident. It is learned when you show up anyway. The hard way is not the wrong way. It is the way that stays. Because one day, you will realize you are no longer translating in your head. You are just living. Speaking. Listening. Understanding without effort. And that moment will arrive quietly. Just like everything that truly lasts. Climate shapes the mood. Before moving to the United States, I thought climate was just background information. Something you check on a weather app, then forget. After living here, I learned climate quietly shapes everything. How people move, how they speak, how they love, and how they stay silent. It shapes moods first, and moods shape relationships. Where I grew up, weather changed slowly. Seasons blended into each other. People adapted without thinking much about it. In many parts of the US, climate is sharper, more dramatic. Winters arrive with authority. Summers make demands. The body reacts before the mind has time to explain what is happening. My first winter surprised me. The cold was not emotional. It was practical. It told you when to stay inside and when to hurry. Streets emptied early. Conversations shortened. People conserved energy the way they conserved heat. I noticed myself doing the same thing without realizing it. Fewer words. Less movement. More quiet. This was not sadness. It was adaptation. Science supports this more than we realize. Research in behavioral psychology shows that colder temperatures often reduce social interaction, while extreme heat increases irritability and fatigue. Climate affects neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which directly influence mood and motivation. In simple terms, weather changes how your brain feels before you choose how to act. Understanding this changed how I interpreted silence, both in myself and in my marriage. During long winters, evenings felt shorter. Even when the clock said otherwise. Darkness arrived early. The house felt smaller. We stayed indoors more, talked less, and rested more. At first, I worried. I thought distance was growing. Later, I realized we were just responding to the environment. In warmer months, everything shifted. Windows opened. Conversations lingered. People smiled more easily. Neighbors appeared outside. My English improved faster in summer, not because I studied more, but because I interacted more. Climate created opportunity. If you are learning English, this matters. Motivation is not a personal flaw. It is often seasonal. When the weather is heavy, your brain slows down. Focus drops. Listening feels harder. You blame yourself, but the environment is quietly influencing you. The same thing happens in relationships. In the US, people rarely talk about how weather affects emotional availability. But you can see it everywhere. In colder states, people value personal space deeply. Silence is normal. In warmer regions, conversations stretch longer. Emotional expression feels easier. Neither is better. They are just different adaptations. I noticed how climate changed daily routines in my household. In winter, we communicated more through actions than words. Making soup. Adjusting the thermostat. Leaving a blanket on the couch. These were sentences without language. In summer, we talked more, laughed more, stayed up later. Same relationship. Different weather. Once I understood this, silence stopped feeling dangerous. It started feeling seasonal. This insight helped my English learning too. I stopped forcing productivity on low-energy days. Instead of pushing myself to speak more, I listened more. I let slow days be slow. Strangely, this made progress steadier. Less guilt. More consistency. There is a concept in environmental psychology called contextual behavior. It explains how behavior changes depending on surroundings. Not personality. You are not less loving in winter. You are conserving warmth. You are not less motivated during bad weather. Your brain is protecting energy. Marriage does not exist in a vacuum. It exists inside climate, culture, schedules, and stress. When you move countries, all these factors change at once. Expecting emotional expression to remain identical is unrealistic. One evening, during a particularly cold week, I caught myself worrying again. The house was quiet. Outside, snow reflected the streetlight, making everything glow softly. I paused and asked a better question, not, is something wrong, but what is this season asking of us? The answer was simple. Rest. Fewer words. More presence. Language learning followed the same rhythm. Some days, English flowed easily. Other days, words felt frozen. Instead of panicking, I learned to wait. Fluency, like weather, moves in cycles. If you are practicing listening and speaking, notice how your comprehension changes. With mood and energy. On cold, dark days, focus on slow listening. Familiar stories. Repetition. On bright days, speak more. Engage. Let climate guide your practice instead of fighting it. This approach reduced burnout completely. Climate also shapes expectations. In the US, independence is often tied to weather conditions. Harsh climates encourage self-reliance. People solve problems quietly. They do not always explain what they are feeling. Understanding this cultural layer made American silence feel less personal. My marriage did not become quiet because love faded. It became quiet because life demanded efficiency, rest, and adaptation. Love adjusted instead of disappearing. That realization changed everything. The biggest mistake we make is assuming emotions should look the same in every environment. They should not. Healthy relationships are flexible. They change volume without losing meaning. English taught me this lesson gently. Marriage taught it deeply. Climate shapes mood. Mood shapes communication. Communication shapes relationships. When you understand the first step, the rest becomes easier to read. So if things feel quiet right now, look outside before looking inward. The weather may be speaking first. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, both in language and in marriage, is to match the season instead of fighting it. Quiet does not always mean cold. Sometimes, it means conserving warmth for what comes next. Culture shock at home. Culture shock is supposed to happen outside your home. At work. In supermarkets. In conversations with strangers. No one really warns you that it will also walk quietly into your living room, sit on your couch, and slowly change how love sounds. When I moved to the United States, I expected cultural differences in public life. I did not expect them to reshape my marriage so subtly. At first, everything felt normal. We were busy settling in. New schedules. New responsibilities. New stress. Culture shock hid behind productivity. But once life slowed down, I began noticing small differences that felt bigger than they should have. Not dramatic conflicts. Just quiet confusion. In my original culture, home is a place of constant interaction. Talking fills the space. Silence feels suspicious. Love is checked regularly through words. Questions like "Did you eat?" or "Are you tired?" are not practical. They are emotional signals. When those signals disappear, something feels missing. In America, home works differently. Silence is not neglect. It is comfort. People assume presence equals care. You do not need to ask how someone feels if nothing seems wrong. This difference sounds small, but it changes everything. I remember one evening clearly. We were both at home, doing our own things. I felt unsettled, though I could not explain why. Finally, I asked, "Is everything okay?" The answer came quickly, "Yeah." Why? No tension. No problem. Just confusion, mine. That moment revealed the cultural gap. I was asking for reassurance. The other person heard a diagnostic question. Two languages. Two emotional systems. Same words. Different meanings. This is where many couples struggle after moving to the US. They think the relationship has changed, when in reality, the communication rules have. What once felt loving now feels unnecessary. What once felt caring now feels intrusive. Culture shock does not announce itself. It rewrites expectations quietly. The same thing happens when learning English. You translate words correctly, but misunderstand intent. You answer the question, but miss the emotion behind it. This creates a subtle loneliness. You are present, but not fully understood. Psychologists call this pragmatic misunderstanding. It happens when people understand language, but not usage. You know what the sentence means, but not what it is doing socially. In American culture, language is often functional first, emotional second. Once I understood this, many moments suddenly made sense. At home, I began noticing how care was expressed differently. Not through questions, but through actions. Groceries bought without discussion. A car warmed up before leaving. Tasks shared without negotiation. These were quiet sentences I had not learned to read yet. Culture shock made me question myself. Was I too sensitive? Too needy? The answer was neither. I was simply using the wrong cultural lens. When you move countries, you do not just learn a new language. You unlearn old emotional habits. This process is uncomfortable. It feels like losing something familiar. Many people resist it. They hold on to old expectations and interpret everything through them. That resistance creates conflict where none needs to exist. English learning helped me here. As my listening improved, I stopped translating word for word and started listening for function. What is this sentence trying to do? End a conversation. Keep it polite. Show efficiency. Once I applied the same logic to marriage, communication improved without anyone changing behavior. The house did not become colder. My interpretation became warmer. There is also a policy layer to American culture that affects home life. Work hours are long. Commutes are heavy. Time feels scarce. People protect their energy. Emotional efficiency becomes a survival skill. This is not a lack of love. It is adaptation. Understanding this reduced resentment completely. Silence after a long day was no longer rejection. It was recovery. Culture shock at home is dangerous because it feels personal. But most of the time, it is structural. It comes from systems, schedules, and social norms, not emotional withdrawal. One night, instead of asking, "Why don't we talk like before?" I asked a better question. How do people here show care without words? The answers were everywhere. In routines. In reliability. In quiet consistency. The same shift transformed my English practice. I stopped chasing fluency that sounded impressive. I focused on English that worked. Clear. Simple. Context-aware. Communication improved immediately. Love in America did not disappear. It changed form. Once I accepted that, the silence stopped feeling like a threat. It became information. It told me we were safe enough not to perform affection constantly. Culture shock does not mean something is wrong. It means something is different, and difference requires translation. If you are learning English while navigating relationships in the US, remember this: misunderstanding does not mean failure. It means you are between systems. That space is uncomfortable, but temporary. Over time, your emotional ear adjusts. You hear meaning in pauses. You feel care in routines. You stop demanding proof and start noticing patterns. The home becomes quiet again, but this time, it feels grounded. And one day, you realize culture shock did not weaken your relationship. It taught it a new language. One that speaks softly and lasts longer. Love becomes routine. No one warns you about the moment when love stops announcing itself. It does not leave. It does not collapse. It simply becomes quiet, efficient, almost invisible. One day, you realize your relationship runs on routines instead of excitement, and that realization hits harder than any argument ever did. You start asking yourself a dangerous question. If love feels this ordinary, is it still love? In the early days, love in America looked familiar to me because movies had prepared me for it. Big conversations. Clear emotions. Strong words. But real life here was different. Love showed up on time. Love paid bills. Love followed schedules. And slowly, love stopped explaining itself. At first, I did not notice the change. Routine crept in gently. Morning coffee. Work. Dinner. Sleep. Repeat. No drama. No crisis. Just stability. And strangely, that stability made me uneasy. My brain, trained to associate intensity with meaning, began to feel suspicious of calm. This is where many people panic, both in relationships and in language learning. When progress becomes boring, we assume it has stopped. In my marriage, I caught myself missing the early confusion, the long talks, the emotional uncertainty. Back then, every word felt important. Now, conversations were shorter, practical, sometimes skipped entirely. Love had become predictable, and predictability felt like loss. Psychology explains this clearly. The brain releases more dopamine during novelty. New experiences feel exciting because your brain is chemically rewarded for paying attention. Routine reduces dopamine spikes, even if the situation is healthy. This does not mean something is wrong. It means your brain has adapted. Understanding this saved my marriage. Routine is not the enemy of love. Misinterpreting routine is. In American culture, routine is often a sign of success. Stability is valued. Calm is respected. A relationship that does not constantly demand attention is considered mature. But if you come from a background where emotional expression equals connection, routine can feel emotionally empty. I remember a moment that made this clear. One evening, we sat in the same room doing different things. No conversation. No tension. Just quiet. I suddenly felt a wave of sadness, sharp and unexpected. Nothing had happened. Yet something felt missing. I realized I was grieving the sound of love, not the love itself. This was the same feeling I had while learning English at an intermediate level. The excitement of learning new words was gone, but fluency had not arrived yet. Progress felt slow and dull. Many learners quit at this stage, not because they are failing, but because growth has become routine. The parallel was impossible to ignore. In both cases, the work was happening quietly beneath the surface. In marriage, routine builds trust. Knowing what to expect reduces anxiety. In language learning, repetition builds automaticity. You stop thinking consciously. You just respond. Both processes feel boring from the inside, but powerful from the outside. I began paying attention to what routine actually contained. The way we coordinated schedules without discussion. The way decisions were made smoothly. The absence of emotional chaos. These were signs of partnership, not distance. Routine meant we were no longer auditioning for each other. This realization shifted something important. I stopped trying to feel love all the time and started observing how it functioned. Love was not loud, but it was reliable. It showed up every day without asking for recognition. English taught me the same lesson. When I stopped chasing impressive sentences and focused on usable language, communication improved. My English became less expressive, but more effective. Fewer words. Better timing. Routine also revealed hidden intimacy. Inside predictable patterns, small variations stood out more clearly. A different tone. A slight delay. A gentle check-in. When you stop expecting fireworks, you start noticing warmth. There is a concept in relationship psychology called secure attachment. In secure relationships, partners do not need constant reassurance. Silence feels safe. Routine feels grounding. Excitement comes and goes. But trust remains. What once felt like emotional flatness was actually emotional safety. The problem was never routine. The problem was my expectation that love should always feel new. America teaches efficiency early. Time is precious. Energy is protected. Emotional displays are often private. Routine becomes the structure that holds life together. Once I understood this cultural context, routine stopped feeling like neglect. Instead of asking, why doesn't love feel exciting? I asked, what does love make easier now? The answers were obvious. Life worked better. Stress was shared. Decisions were simpler. Silence felt less threatening. Language learning mirrored this perfectly. When English became routine, it stopped being stressful. I did not celebrate every correct sentence. I just used the language. That was the goal all along. Routine is not where stories end. It is where stories continue without noise. If you are listening to this and feeling disappointed that your relationship feels calm, or your English feels repetitive, pause before judging that feeling. Calm does not mean empty. Repetition does not mean stagnation. Often, it means you have reached a level where effort has turned into habit. Love that survives routine is not weaker. It is stronger, quieter, and far more durable. The excitement you miss is not gone. It is resting. And sometimes, the most meaningful progress in life happens when nothing dramatic seems to be happening at all. Silence is not absence. Silence is dangerous when you don't understand its language. It looks empty. It feels unfinished. And if you grew up believing that love must be spoken, explained, and confirmed regularly, silence can feel like abandonment even when no one has left. This was the hardest lesson for me to learn after settling into marriage in the United States. Silence does not mean absence. At first, silence scared me. Not loud silence, the kind that follows an argument, but calm, ordinary silence. The kind that sits between two people who know each other. Well, there were evenings when no one asked questions, no one checked in emotionally, and nothing needed fixing. And yet my mind kept searching for problems, like a radio stuck between stations. I realized something uncomfortable. I was equating silence with emotional distance, because I didn't know how to read quiet intimacy. In my earlier years, love always came with sound. Talking things through. Reassuring words. Emotional summaries at the end of the day. Silence usually meant tension. So when silence appeared without conflict, my brain didn't know what to do with it. It kept asking, what am I missing? The same pattern showed up in my English learning. When conversations were loud and expressive, I felt engaged. When they became short and quiet, I felt excluded, even if I understood everything. I mistook reduced verbal expression for reduced connection. But over time, I noticed something important. Native speakers were not withdrawing. They were simply comfortable. Psychology explains this well. In secure environments, humans reduce unnecessary communication. When safety is established, constant signaling becomes inefficient. Silence becomes a sign that nothing urgent needs attention. In contrast, constant talking often appears in unstable situations where reassurance is required. In other words, silence can be proof of security. Once I understood this, silence stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling like trust. At home, silence began to take on shape. It was not empty. It was filled with routine sounds. Footsteps. Pages turning. The soft click of a light switch. These sounds became familiar markers of presence. No words were needed because connection had moved to a different layer. This shift was subtle but powerful. I stopped demanding verbal proof of love. Instead, I noticed patterns. Consistency. Reliability. These things speak quietly but clearly. Love was not absent. It was embedded. The same thing happened with English. I reached a point where conversations didn't require effort. I didn't need to prepare sentences. I didn't need to impress. Silence appeared naturally, and it didn't scare me anymore. It gave space for listening, thinking, and responding honestly. There is a concept in communication studies called high-context communication. In high-context environments, meaning is carried by shared understanding, not explicit words. Relationships evolve in this direction over time. Early stages are loud. Later stages are quiet, but rich. Marriage follows this path. So does language mastery. I remember one particular evening that changed how I felt about silence. We were sitting together, not talking, both absorbed in our own thoughts. Suddenly, I felt calm instead of anxious. The silence didn't ask anything of me. It didn't need interpretation. It just existed. That calm was new. I realized my fear of silence had less to do with my partner and more to do with my own need for confirmation. Silence forced me to sit with uncertainty without rushing to fix it. That was uncomfortable, but also freeing. In the US, silence is often treated as neutral, not negative. People do not rush to fill gaps in conversation. Pauses are allowed. This cultural habit slowly trained me to tolerate quiet without panic. And as my tolerance grew, my understanding deepened. Silence is not absence. Absence has weight. Silence has space. This distinction matters in marriage and in English learning. When you stop filling every pause with worry, you allow meaning to surface naturally. You hear tone more clearly. You notice small shifts. You become present instead of reactive. I began practicing this intentionally. When silence appeared, I stayed with it. I didn't label it. I didn't interrupt it. I treated it as part of the conversation. The result was surprising. Communication became more honest. When words did come, they mattered more. This approach also transformed my listening skills in English. I stopped panicking when I didn't catch every word. I listened for intention instead of sound. Conversations became easier because I wasn't fighting the pauses. Many people fear silence because it feels like loss of control. But silence often means the opposite. Things are stable enough not to need control. If your marriage feels quiet right now, ask yourself this before assuming something is wrong. Does this silence feel heavy, or does it feel neutral? Heavy silence demands attention. Neutral silence is simply space. Learning to tell the difference is a skill. One that takes time, patience, and trust. Silence taught me to slow down. To stop narrating my emotions constantly. To let connection exist without explanation. This was not emotional distance. It was emotional maturity. And once I learned to hear silence properly, it stopped frightening me. It started guiding me. Because silence is not the absence of love. It is often the sound of love no longer needing to prove itself. English through daily moments. I used to believe that learning English required special time. A desk. A notebook. A quiet room. Something official. Something serious. But living in the United States slowly corrected that belief. English was not waiting for me in textbooks. It was hiding in ordinary moments, the kind so small you usually ignore them. And strangely, those moments taught me more than any formal lesson ever did. My English did not improve because I studied harder. It improved because I lived longer. Daily life in America is full of language. But it is not dramatic language. It is practical, repetitive, and emotionally neutral. That makes it perfect for learning, if you know how to listen. At first, I didn't. I kept searching for important English, the kind that sounds impressive. Meanwhile, real English was happening quietly around me. It showed up in grocery stores. In parking lots. In short conversations that lasted less than 10 seconds. You're good. No worries. Have a nice one. These phrases confused me at first. They felt incomplete. But I heard them again and again, and slowly, my brain stopped translating them word by word. Meaning arrived automatically. That was new. At home, I started noticing how English entered my marriage too. Not through deep conversations, but through small exchanges. I'll handle it. Later is fine. I already did. These sentences carried trust, coordination, and care, all without emotional decoration. English didn't just describe our life. It organized it. This is where many learners miss an opportunity. They wait for perfect conditions to practice English, while English is already practicing them through routine. Language learning does not need to feel like effort all the time. Sometimes, it needs to feel invisible. There is a concept in cognitive science called incidental learning. It means you learn without trying to learn. Your brain absorbs patterns while focused on something else. Children learn language this way. Adults can too, but only if they stop treating every interaction like a test. I started using daily moments intentionally. When I washed dishes, I repeated simple phrases in my head. When I drove, I listened to the same slow English story again, not to understand more, but to understand faster. Familiarity replaced struggle. At first, this felt too easy. I worried it wasn't real studying. But results appeared quietly. I began responding faster. I hesitated less. My pronunciation softened. English started feeling less like a foreign object and more like a tool I used without thinking. This change affected my confidence deeply. The same thing was happening in my marriage. Emotional communication shifted from long talks to shared routines. Cooking together. Walking without speaking. Watching the weather change through the window. These moments felt empty before. Now they felt full. I realized something important. Daily moments carry the most honest version of language and love. There is no performance. No pressure. Just repetition and presence. In American culture, daily life is highly structured. Schedules matter. Efficiency matters. People communicate just enough to keep things moving. This can feel cold if you expect emotional expression everywhere. But if you learn to read it, it becomes incredibly clear. English reflects this culture. Short sentences. Clear intent. Minimal emotion unless necessary. Once I accepted this, I stopped trying to sound expressive and focused on sounding accurate. Communication improved immediately. I practiced English by narrating my own actions silently. I'm turning left. I need more time. This can wait. Simple sentences. Real situations. No pressure. Over time, these phrases came out naturally in real conversations. My listening improved too. I stopped expecting dramatic intonation. I listened for purpose. Was the speaker informing me? Ending the conversation. Making a decision. Understanding intent mattered more than catching every word. This reduced anxiety more than any vocabulary list ever did. Daily moments also taught me emotional English, the kind textbooks ignore. Tone. Timing. When to speak. When not to. In my marriage, saying less often meant understanding more. In English, the same rule applied. One evening, after a long day, I noticed how naturally English came out of me. No planning. No translating. Just small, functional sentences doing their job. That realization was quiet, but powerful. Fluency had arrived without an announcement. This is why many people underestimate daily practice. It doesn't feel impressive. It doesn't feel productive. But it works, because it matches how the brain actually learns. Love works the same way. Grand gestures fade. Daily care stays. Big conversations matter. But small consistency builds trust. My marriage felt quieter, because it had moved into daily understanding. English felt easier, because it had moved into daily use. If you are listening to this while trying to improve your English, stop waiting for motivation. Use routine instead. Let English live where you already are. In your kitchen. In your car. In your thoughts. If your marriage feels quiet, look at the daily moments. They tell the truth more clearly than emotional speeches. Progress does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it blends into your life so well that you only notice it when you realize something is no longer difficult. That is not failure. That is mastery. And it happens one ordinary moment at a time. A quiet change inside me. That night, I did not sleep very well. I was not sad. I was not angry. But my mind was busy. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet. Only the sound of the clock was moving. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. I thought about the past few days. I thought about the people I had met. I thought about the small moments that stayed in my heart. Something inside me was changing. Not fast. Not loud. But slowly. Very slowly. In the past, I always believed that big changes came from big events. A new job. A big decision. A serious mistake. But now, I was not so sure. This change did not come from one big moment. It came from many small ones. A short conversation. A quiet walk. A simple smile from a stranger. A few honest words spoken at the right time. I turned on my side and closed my eyes. I remembered a sentence someone once told me. Sometimes, life does not shout. Sometimes, it whispers. That sentence made sense now. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was soft and pale. The sun was not strong yet. The air felt fresh and clean. I made a cup of coffee and stood near the window. I did not check my phone. I did not rush. I just stood there. Outside, people were starting their day. A man was walking his dog. A woman was opening her small shop. A child was laughing loudly on the sidewalk. Everything looked normal. But inside me, something felt different. I felt calmer. Not happy in an excited way. Not peaceful in a perfect way. Just calmer. I realized that I was not thinking about the future all the time. I was not worrying about what would happen next. I was simply in that moment. And that felt new to me. Later that day, I decided to take a long walk. No destination. No plan. I walked slowly, listening to my steps. Left foot. Right foot. Breathing in. Breathing out. At first, my mind tried to pull me back. It reminded me of unfinished work. Old regrets. Things I could not control. But I did not fight those thoughts. I just noticed them. And let them pass. Like clouds moving across the sky. After a while, the noise in my head became quieter. I noticed small details around me. The sound of leaves in the wind. The smell of food from a nearby cafe. The warmth of the sun on my face. I realized something important in that moment. I had been living too fast for a long time. Always moving. Always chasing. Always thinking about the next thing. But I had forgotten how to simply be. I sat down on a bench and watched people pass by. Some looked busy. Some looked tired. Some looked lost. Some looked hopeful. I wondered how many of them were feeling the same way I once did. Always trying. Always pushing. But never stopping to breathe. I asked myself a quiet question. What do I really need right now? The answer surprised me. I did not need more money. I did not need more success. I did not need approval from others. I needed honesty. Honesty with myself. I needed to admit that I was tired. That I was afraid sometimes. That I did not have everything figured out. And that was okay. That evening, I wrote in my notebook. Not long sentences. Not perfect grammar. Just honest words. I wrote about my fears. I wrote about my hopes. I wrote about the person I was becoming. For the first time in a long time, I did not judge my thoughts. I did not tell myself to be stronger or do better. I simply listened. And something strange happened. The more honest I was, the lighter I felt. It was like putting down a heavy bag I had been carrying for years, without realizing how heavy it was. Before going to sleep, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked the same. My eyes looked a little softer. I smiled, not a big smile. Just a small one. I whispered quietly. You are learning. Not learning how to win. Not learning how to impress. But learning how to live. That night, I slept deeply. No racing thoughts. No heavy worries. Just rest. The next day would bring new challenges. I knew that. Life would not suddenly become easy. Problems would still exist. Difficult days would still come. But now, I had something new. Awareness. I understood that change does not always arrive like a storm. Sometimes, it comes like the morning light. Soft. Gentle. Almost invisible. And if you are not paying attention, you might miss it. But once you notice it, you are never the same again. Moving forward, slowly. The morning came quietly. No alarm. No rush. Just light entering the room. I opened my eyes and stayed still for a moment. I listened to my breathing. Slow. Steady. For the first time in a long while, I did not feel the need to hurry. I knew the day would ask things from me. Time. Energy. Decisions. But I also knew something new. I did not need to give everything at once. I got out of bed and stretched my arms. The floor was cold under my feet. It reminded me that I was here. In my body. In this moment. I made breakfast slowly. I noticed the sound of the knife on the cutting board. The smell of warm bread. The steam rising from my cup. These were small things. Very small. But they made me feel grounded. I realized that my life had not changed. On the outside. Same place. Same responsibilities. Same problems waiting. But on the inside, my pace was different. And that changed everything. Later that day, I met someone I knew. They asked me the usual questions. How are you? What's next for you? Are you busy these days? Before, I would answer quickly. With energy. With a smile that tried to hide my tiredness. But this time, I paused. I said, I'm doing okay. I'm taking things one step at a time. The words felt honest. They did not sound impressive. They did not sound exciting. But they felt true. And that was enough. As the day went on, I noticed something else. I was more patient. When things did not go as planned, I did not immediately blame myself. When someone spoke sharply, I did not take it personally. I reminded myself quietly. Not everything is about me. That thought gave me space. Space to breathe. Space to respond instead of react. In the afternoon, I took another walk. Not because I needed exercise, but because I wanted clarity. I walked past familiar streets. Places I had seen many times before. Yet they looked different. Not because they had changed, but because I had slowed down enough to see them. I noticed cracks in the sidewalk. Old trees growing beside new buildings. People sitting alone, lost in thought. I realized something important. Everyone is carrying something. Some carry regret. Some carry hope. Some carry pain they never talk about. And everyone is moving forward in their own way. At their own speed. I stopped and sat near a small park. Children were playing. They laughed loudly. They fell. They got back up. They did not worry about tomorrow. They did not worry about mistakes. They were fully present. Watching them, I felt a quiet truth settle inside me. Life is not a race. There is no finish line that proves your worth. There is only the path in front of you. And the way you choose to walk it. That evening, I reflected on my past self. The version of me who always wanted more. Who believed rest was weakness. Who thought slowing down meant falling behind. I felt compassion for that version. They were trying their best. They just did not know another way. I whispered softly. Thank you for getting me here. Then I let that version rest. Before bed, I wrote again. This time, I wrote promises. Not big promises. Not impossible goals. Small ones. I will listen to myself. I will allow rest. I will move forward, even if it's slow. I knew I would forget sometimes. I knew old habits would return. But now, I had awareness. And awareness changes how you fall. It makes you gentler with yourself. As I turned off the light, I felt something warm in my chest. Not excitement. Not certainty. But trust. Trust that I do not need to have everything figured out. Trust that growth does not always look dramatic. Trust that quiet progress still counts. Tomorrow would come. And the day after that. Some days would feel heavy. Some days would feel light. But I was no longer afraid of moving forward. Because I understood something deeply now. You do not have to run to move ahead. You can walk. You can pause. You can even rest. As long as you are honest with yourself, you are already on the right path. I closed my eyes, and with a calm breath, I welcomed whatever came next. Not with fear, but with openness. When I finally understood, there was a moment I did not expect. It did not come during a big decision. It did not come after a long conversation. It came quietly, on an ordinary day. That morning felt normal. Nothing special happened. No good news. No bad news. Just another day. I went through my routine. I worked. I ate. I answered messages. Everything moved as usual. And then, in the middle of the day, I stopped. Not because I was tired. Not because something went wrong. I stopped because I suddenly noticed something. I was okay. Not excited. Not unhappy. Just okay. And that surprised me. In the past, I was always waiting for something. Waiting to feel successful. Waiting to feel confident. Waiting to feel complete. I believed that one day, everything would make sense. That one day, I would finally arrive. But standing there, in that ordinary moment, I realized something important. There is no final arrival. There is no perfect version of life waiting. At the end, there is only now. That realization felt strange. A little uncomfortable. A little freeing. If there is no final moment, then I don't need to rush. If there is no perfect future, then this moment matters more than I thought. I took a deep breath. And for the first time, I stopped searching. Later that afternoon, I met an old friend. We talked about our lives, our work, our plans. They spoke quickly, with energy, with urgency. I listened carefully. I heard something familiar in their voice. Pressure. The need to prove something. The fear of falling behind. I had that voice once. I still have it sometimes. But now, I recognized it. And I did not let it control me. My friend asked, "Do you ever feel like you're running out of time?" I paused. I thought about the question. Then I said slowly, "I used to feel that way every day. Now, not as much." They looked surprised. I did not explain more. Some understandings cannot be explained. They can only be lived. That evening, I walked home alone. The sky was turning orange and pink. The air was cooler. People passed me, each one carrying their own story. I felt connected to them. Not because our lives were the same, but because we were all trying. Trying to live. Trying to understand. Trying to feel enough. I realized something else then. Everyone is doing the best they can, with what they know at that moment. And that includes me. When I got home, I sat in silence. No music. No phone. Just silence. At first, it felt uncomfortable. My mind tried to fill the space. Thoughts appeared. Old worries. Old doubts. But I did not follow them. I let them come. And let them go. Slowly, the silence became peaceful. And in that quiet space, I understood something deeply. I had been chasing answers outside of myself. Approval. Validation. Certainty. But the answer I needed was simpler. I needed permission. Permission to be human. Permission to not know. Permission to rest. Permission to change my mind. Permission to grow slowly. I realized no one was stopping me. I was the one holding myself back. With expectations. With comparisons. With fear. And now, I could let those things soften. That night, I looked back at my journey. Not with regret. Not with pride. But with understanding. Every step made sense now. The mistakes. The delays. The confusion. They were not failures. They were lessons. They shaped how I see the world today. And for the first time, I felt gratitude for all of it. Even the hard parts. Before going to bed, I stood by the window. The city was quiet. Lights glowed softly in the distance. I whispered to myself, "You are allowed to be here. Not ahead. Not behind. Just here." And that was enough. As I lay down, a calm thought stayed with me. Life is not asking me to be perfect. It is asking me to be present. To notice. To listen. To feel. And to move forward with honesty. I knew challenges would return. Doubt would return. Fear would return. But now, I knew something important. They do not mean I am lost. They mean I am alive. Learning. Growing. Becoming. With that thought, I closed my eyes. And I felt ready. Not for answers. But for whatever came next. Quiet, but still love. The ending did not arrive with fireworks. There was no dramatic speech. No sudden change. It arrived the same way everything important in my life did. Quietly. One morning, I woke up before the alarm. The room was still dark. The house was silent. I listened. Not for noise. But for presence. And I felt it. A calm feeling. A steady feeling. Nothing exciting. Nothing scary. Just steady. For a long time, I thought love had to feel loud. Big emotions. Strong reactions. Clear signs. Movies taught me that. Social media reinforced it. Love was supposed to feel intense. If it didn't, something must be wrong. But standing there, in the quiet morning, I finally understood. Real love often feels calm. In America, life moves fast. Schedules. Bills. Plans. People measure success in numbers. Time. Money. Marriage here is not always romantic. It is practical. Two people sharing responsibility. Stress. Daily decisions. And I used to think that meant love was fading. Now I know better. That quiet feeling was not distance. It was trust. Trust that we did not need to prove anything. Trust that silence was safe. We could sit in the same room, doing different things, and still feel connected. That is not boring. That is mature love. I remembered the early days, when everything felt new, when every message mattered. That stage was beautiful, but it was not meant to last forever. Intensity burns fast. Stability burns slow. And slow is what lasts. Later that day, we talked. Not a serious talk. Not a heavy talk. Just an honest one. I said, "Do you ever feel like things are too quiet?" They smiled and said, "I feel like things are peaceful." That word stayed with me. Peaceful. Peace does not look exciting from the outside. It doesn't post well. It doesn't create drama. But it allows growth. It allows space to breathe. And for the first time, I stopped questioning it. I thought about all the times I confused anxiety with passion. All the moments I thought chaos meant connection. I was wrong. Calm does not mean empty. Calm means safe. As an immigrant in the US, I carried many pressures. Language barriers. Cultural differences. Learning English slowly. Through real conversations. Through daily life. Marriage became part of that learning. I learned new words. Commitment. Patience. Consistency. Words that do not sound exciting, but build strong lives. In the evening, we had dinner together. Nothing fancy. Just simple food. Simple conversation. We talked about work. About the weather. At one point, we laughed. A quiet laugh. A real one. And I realized something. Happiness does not always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Before going to sleep, I reflected on the journey. From doubt to understanding. From fear to acceptance. Marriage did not become quieter because love disappeared. It became quieter because love settled in. Like a house after a storm. Still standing. Stronger. If you are listening to this, and your marriage feels quiet, pause before you worry. Ask yourself, do you feel safe? Do you feel respected? Do you feel supported? If the answer is yes, then the quiet may not be a warning. It may be a gift. Learning English through this story matters too. Because real English lives. In real moments. Not perfect sentences. Not fast speech. But honest words. Spoken slowly. With meaning. Just like love. This story is not about perfection. It is about understanding. Understanding that growth feels different at every stage. Understanding that calm is not failure. Understanding that quiet can be strong. And now, as this story ends, I want to leave you with one thought. If your life feels quieter than before, it doesn't mean you lost something. You may have found something deeper. That is all for today. I will make more similar videos in the future. Please subscribe to watch them. If this story felt quiet, that was not an accident. Because real life is quiet more often than it is loud. Real love grows without applause. Real progress happens when no one is watching. And real English is learned the same way. Not through perfect grammar. Not through fast, dramatic speeches. But through slow stories. Honest emotions. Simple words that stay with you. If you are learning English, and sometimes you feel stuck, tired, or behind, this story is for you. If your marriage feels calm, and you are secretly wondering if something is wrong, this story is also for you. Because quiet does not mean empty. Quiet often means stable. And stability is where real growth begins. In the next videos on this channel, we will continue learning real American English through real-life stories about marriage and relationships in the US, culture shock and everyday life in America, slow English listening, reading, and speaking practice. Stories that help you understand the language and yourself. If you want English that feels human. English you can actually use. English you can feel, not just memorize. Subscribe to the channel now. Like this video if the story touched you. Leave a comment and tell me. Does quiet ever make you nervous too? Your story matters here. Your pace is welcome here. This is not just an English channel. This is a place to slow down, listen deeply, and grow. One story at a time. Stay with me. The next story might feel like it was written just for you.